like. I'm delighted next to welcome Beth Carlson Malena. She, with others, has planted One Way Church in British Columbia, and her talk is entitled Contextual Mission and Missional Imagination. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you so much, Lisa and the whole group here. Is everybody hearing me okay? Good. I'm going to try to share my screen here as well, so just bear with me for a second. Okay. So my church is actually called Open Way, just so you know, but that's fine. There's actually another church here called The Way. There's all kind of ways happening. So that is our context here. I'm in Vancouver, or the land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and I'm just starting my 15-minute timer for myself here. So I want to focus on a theme that actually wasn't reflected in that original title. Sorry, Ian, when Ian got that from you, I was in the midst of COVID and I wasn't thinking super well about what I would actually be talking about. What I want to talk about is how we discern alongside other people. Often our initial vision for something comes individually, but I think it's really rare that we end up starting anything alone. At some stage, we're going to be sharing that vision with others, and the discernment is going to be including them. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my story and how that happened in our kind of life as a church. So just some context for me, I am a Baptist person. I grew up Baptist in Saskatoon who has had lovely interactions with Anglican people. So I'm going to contextualize why I fit into this gathering, hopefully. I first encountered some amazing Anglicans when I was studying here in Vancouver at Regent College. And then I crossed paths with Andrew, who we've heard from today when we were both working in the downtown east side here in Vancouver. I just had to give you this photo of Andrew from when I met him. You're welcome, Andrew. I ended up feeling a pull toward church ministry with folks on the margins, but coming out and marrying my wife really complicated that because I was in more of an evangelical kind of context. So I considered, do I work with other denominations? I even met with Laurel Dexter, who's on this call at that point. That was back in 2013, and thought, maybe I should join the Anglicans. I felt a little too low church for that context from where I grew up. But it was a whole process. And in the end, I was hired by a queer Christian organization called Generous Space. And my wife and I both moved to Toronto. And we got this more Anglican overlap through some experiences on the U of T campus. So with Dave Krause, who's also here, and Brian Walsh, and some amazing people in Toronto. It was amazing working for this group. It was kind of like being a national chaplain for queer people. But I was sensing this is where my listening was starting. I was starting to feel like I want to journey with one group of people in one place over a longer period of time. And that was where the spirit was starting to stir in me. Maybe something that looks a little more like pastoring, like being a minister of a church could be what I want. And as much as we loved y'all in Ontario, my wife and I realized that we wanted to settle here in Vancouver. There were a few affirming churches at the time, but not many of them were in that kind of post-evangelical flavor. And so we had a sense that this would involve starting something new. Thankfully, Generous Space was willing to let us move back here and work part-time with them. And so in May 2017, we came back to Vancouver, and that's where this kind of part of the story that I want to dwell in a little more started. So we wanted to start fairly quickly, and because it would mean, 3 more years or so to get involved in any of the existing affirming denominations, I knew we would be starting independently. So that might feel a little out there for those of you that are quite connected in the Anglican world, but we really wanted to do this with a lot of partnership. I knew I didn't want to pastor by myself, so I started putting feelers out to see, is there anyone else who would work with me? And I found this screenshot of a text message between my wife and I. My wife was back in Vancouver, and she was meeting with her best friend whose father had been a pastor for a long time and was retired. And he just brought this up. Maybe Beth and I should start a church together. His name is Mark Fox. And that's where it all began. We started having conversations, some initial chats before we moved back to Vancouver. And then once we were back here, trying to meet weekly and take time to build trust with one another. So this is Mark. This is us meeting at Bonds off Broadway, a very cheap place to have breakfast. Eating together was a big part of that. Building this relationship as a, I was a queer 30-something woman with a straight cis 60-something guy, and just trying to find our common ground together. And eating together was such a big part of that. We jotted down ideas. We dreamed dreams. We doodled. We tried to see what came through these conversations every week at Bonds and other places. And that relationship building was key. Just Mark, I think, was a little more business minded than I was. I would say I was maybe a little more on the contemplative, mystical side, but we found the synergy between our two approaches in those conversations. And I just want to give props to Mark for being someone who is so aware of power dynamics in this. I think that's a big piece when you're choosing somebody to work with. You're going to have different levels of privilege in how you come together for that partnership. And I think Mark, as an older, again, straight white guy who carried privilege in a lot of that and more experience pastoring, could have very easily dominated a lot of what we talked about. But he was so aware of those things and really was constantly asking for my input, defaulting almost to a fault to what I was thinking, what I was dreaming, encouraging my voice. And I think that was really important for me. I'm realizing that, a lot of my desire, even at that point, for a co-pastor was out of a sense that I was not enough myself, especially just my own, I'm now calling it imposter syndrome, which has lasted quite a while, just as a woman, as a queer person. I don't know if there are other people here who find themselves in groups that aren't traditionally part of, haven't been part of the historical church official leadership, maybe more in sort of quiet and secret and covert ways. But yeah, I think I needed somebody like Mark to validate and encourage my voice and to give me kind of a chance to step into my calling. So not the best motivation to just not feel like I could do it myself, but I'm still grateful for what resulted. I'm grateful for the co-pastor structure that we were able to build. And I think it really allowed me to embrace my own vulnerability and to lead differently as a pastor, as a queer person, as a woman, to build my confidence slowly and have a different approach to pastoring than somebody with different identifiers might have. So a little piece on building trust. And then I also wrote here, creating something that we want to be part of. So a tension I remember we had in those early days was how much of what we're making do we want to give shape to before we see who's going to show up to it? Like, shouldn't we wait? My impulse was, shouldn't we wait and see what the congregation that develops wants it to be? What do they want this church to be? Shouldn't we take their lead instead of, deciding all these things about values and structure up front? And I think that reflected a bit of, again, that vulnerability, that indecisiveness at the beginning of starting something new. But I remember we had a chat with Jared Siebert, who works with New Leaf Ministries, and he had written a book about church planting in Canada, more from this evangelical side. And his advice for us at the time, which I really grabbed onto, was, make sure the thing that you and the Spirit are creating together is something that you're going to want to be part of. Make sure that there's enough of you and what you love and your passion in it that you're going to want to do this, that it's not going to become something that's totally different from who you are and what your gifts and your charisms and your passions are. Leave room for the Spirit to bring some of you into what's happening. And that gave us some confidence to, have a bit of a structure to invite people into so they could bat it around, they could kick the tires and sort of see what it was and whether it was something they felt like they fit with. So after meeting for those months of discerning and praying and listening, I was really resonating with what Michael said about this sense of like, we got to do something. Like, we can't just sit and talk and think and pray for the whole time. We got to try something. So we kind of landed on this why not sort of idea. Why not try it? What do we have to lose? So the first gathering, you'll see pictures here from my living room. We just gathered a few people. And it was the beginning of the church new year that in 2017, Christ the King Sunday, we made crowns together for Christ the King Sunday in this spirit of just going for it, trying things, keeping things in perpetual draft form, being willing to laugh at ourselves, being willing to be childlike and playful in it and make adjustments along the way. And it really took the pressure off of trying to like get things absolutely right or exactly how they would always be from the beginning. So I totally encourage that. And that's become, really a core value for us as we've grown, as we're now at year 7, year 8, is keeping things in perpetual draft form, being willing to playfully experiment around what we do. So after several of these living room meetings, we kind of knew that we needed more partnerships and maybe a space to meet. And we were praying about this. And we decided, it's time to extend the network, extend the collaboration and the partnering even further. And so we ended up, here's another Anglican connection for you. We ended up connecting with Heidi at St. Margaret's, which is an Anglican congregation here in Vancouver. Mark had actually built a website for Heidi and friends when they were doing a missional kind of imaginative idea with a thing called Hanani House. And so he remembered their sanctuary being amazing, circular, even if we're small, we can just gather in that inner circle and we won't feel like it's this cavernous space that we're meeting in. So we reached out and, Heidi said, I would love for you all to use the space in the afternoons on Sunday, but I don't want to be your landlord. I actually want a relationship with you where we can be colleagues, where we can, partner together and build more of an equity and a mutuality with each other. And we were so excited about that because, the challenge of being an independent church is that you're just lone rangers out here without people to partner with and be excited about collaborating with. So to have that built in almost from the start with Heidi was such a gift. And yeah, we had this longing to be colleagues with people, even across denominations, even across from this little independent queer thing to a church that was relatively established and part of quite a large network. And that's been such a gift all the way through the 7 years that we've been together. Heidi now joins our staff meetings once a month. So we get time together every month to build that trust again over shared space, shared time, build accountability, mutual support. We've been able to, and Heidi's the third one from the left there in the photo. I think this was from a Shrove Tuesday waffle kind of thing that we were partnering in together. But here's a more recent photo from when our 2 congregations partnered to build a food pantry outside of the church that we stock for the community. So just being able to work together around special services, seasonal things, projects like this has been so important for our little Lone Ranger congregation, and it's been really encouraging. So that's been incredible, and just continuing to ask who's part of my network, even if they're maybe outside of the traditional people I would work with, how could collaboration actually increase our capacity and give us the ability to do some new things together? I wanted to also just mention something else that's been important in this kind of spirit of collaboration, and that has been how can we work our values into the very structure of what we're building? So this is a picture of me marrying a couple from my church. I have a side gig as a wedding officiant, and this being multi-vocational, first with Generous Space, and now with this wedding work that I do, has meant that I don't have to be the only pastor that is paid at our church. So Mark has now retired. He was with us for our first 5 years, and it was amazing. He also wasn't accepting pay because he said, the government is paying me to be alive. I'm on pension. I don't need that. So that gave us a chance to start a lot smaller. Now I have 2 other co-pastors who both also work part-time and have other things that are happening in their lives. And so all of us can share kind of the small, pastoral staff budget that we have as a small congregation and work as a team, which is really valuable to us to continue to bring those different voices, different ways of hearing God and discerning and partnering together. So all of us are part-time and all of us work together, and we can afford that because of our multi-vocational pattern. We have this value of what we call queering power, turning power upside down, flattening power. And so we've tried to structure our staff team really with this flattened kind of hierarchy, and actually worked in a pay equity system where all of us are getting paid at the same hourly rate. And that was something that was really important to us. And I know that that all sounds maybe a little bit hard to access in more of a set kind of denominational context, but I know for a fact that Laurel and friends at Salal and Cedar have explored some of this even within the Anglican structure, some ideas about how to pay lay leaders. And so if you're interested in how that could look in an Anglican context, maybe chat with Laurel, who's going to be, I think, sharing on Saturday. So queering powered things like consensus decision making with the congregation, with our staff, with our board, trying to work in moments of foraging for tension proactively around conflict instead of just letting conflict blow up really destructively. These are all some things that we've done to try to work that partnership model and discerning together into the ongoing life of the church. And then I just want to close with the fact that I think celebrating milestones is another big part of what this looks like, because we need chances to say, hey, look what the Spirit's done. And look what's we've been able to do together as we've partnered and leaned on each other and built trust. What are our dreams for what's next? So this is our little congregation on our first birthday. We have celebrated every birthday since, because it's important. We're toddlers, right? When we're starting out, we need to really grab onto those birthday moments. And then this past year, a really important moment for us was our co-pastor commissioning service, which would be the closest that our church gets to maybe something like ordination or yeah, the equivalent of that in different structures. So for the church to be able to really bless us and commission us in our work. And that was a huge milestone for us, a huge important moment. So thanks for letting me share just a little bit about our church. I'm so excited that you are all imagining and working on these ideas. And I would just really encourage you to seek out as much partnership with the Spirit and with each other as you can, as we continue to see what the Spirit wants to do through us. If you want to be in touch with me, ask me any questions, feel free to copy down my email and I'm happy to be in touch. Thanks again.